Imagine a world where your government keeps you happy, not because they care about you, but because they're terrified of what you might do if you're hungry and bored. This isn't some dystopian fiction. This was ancient Rome. And the scary part? It's happening right now, all around you, and you probably don't even realize it. Let's go back to Rome, around 140 BC. The Roman Republic was experiencing a massive crisis. Thousands of poor citizens were flooding into the city, unemployment was skyrocketing, and the gap between the rich and poor was getting wider every single day. The elite class owned massive estates worked by slaves, which meant regular Roman citizens couldn't find jobs. People were angry, frustrated, and desperate, and when people get desperate, they revolt. The Roman leaders knew this. They had seen what happened when the masses got too hungry, too angry. Riots would break out, politicians would be attacked in the streets, and entire governments could be overthrown in a matter of days. So the Roman elite came up with a solution that was absolutely genius in its simplicity. They would give the people two things, just two things, to keep them happy and distracted. First, bread. Free grain distributions to hundreds of thousands of citizens. Second, circuses. Massive, spectacular entertainment events that would keep people's minds occupied. This wasn't charity, this wasn't kindness, this was survival. The Roman poet Juvenal, writing around 100 AD, famously said that the Roman people, who once cared about military commands, consulships, and political power, now only cared about two things: bread and circuses. He saw what was happening. The population had given up their political voice, their power to influence government decisions, in exchange for free food and entertainment. Let's talk about the bread first, because this was absolutely massive in scale. The grain dole, as it was called, started small but eventually grew to feed over 300,000 Roman citizens every single month. That's roughly a third of Rome's entire population getting free grain from the government. Emperor Augustus refined this system, creating official lists of citizens eligible for the dole and establishing a dedicated fleet of ships to transport grain from Egypt and North Africa. The amount of organization required was staggering. Rome had to import hundreds of thousands of tons of grain every year, store it in massive warehouses, and distribute it efficiently to prevent riots. But here's the thing, this wasn't about preventing starvation. Rome was wealthy enough that people could have worked and bought their own food. This was about creating dependency. When the government controls your food supply, you become less likely to challenge them. You become compliant. You keep your head down because you're terrified of losing that lifeline. Now let's talk about the circuses, and this is where things get really dark. When Romans said circuses, they weren't talking about clowns and acrobats. They were talking about the most brutal, violent, spectacular entertainment ever created. The Colosseum alone could hold between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators. Think about that scale. That's like a modern football stadium, but instead of sports, you're watching people and animals fight to the death. Gladiatorial combat was the main attraction. These were trained fighters, often slaves or prisoners, who would battle each other with swords, tridents, nets, and other weapons while massive crowds cheered. Some gladiators became celebrities with fan clubs and endorsement deals, just like modern athletes. But make no mistake, this was a blood sport. Thousands of gladiators died in the arena for public entertainment. And it wasn't just gladiators. The Romans would flood the Colosseum with water for mock naval battles, complete with full-sized ships and hundreds of participants. They would release exotic animals like lions, tigers, elephants, and bears, then watch as trained hunters killed them in elaborate displays. Sometimes they would have condemned criminals executed by wild animals in front of cheering crowds. The scale of death was almost unimaginable. Historians estimate that over the roughly 400 years, the Colosseum was used for games, hundreds of thousands of people and over 1 million animals were killed for entertainment. But here's what's truly disturbing. This wasn't mindless violence. This was calculated. Every game, every spectacle was timed for maximum political impact. When emperors were unpopular, they would throw massive games to win back public favor. When there was political unrest, suddenly there would be a week-long festival of games to distract everyone. The message was clear. Don't worry about politics, don't worry about your lack of power, just enjoy the show. The system worked terrifyingly well. Roman emperors understood that as long as people's basic needs were met and they were entertained, they wouldn't ask difficult questions. They wouldn't demand political representation. They wouldn't organize and challenge the concentration of power among the elite. One emperor, Fronto, explicitly stated that the Roman people were held together by two things alone: grain and spectacles. He wasn't being poetic, he was being strategic. This was official government policy. Keep them fed and distracted, and you can do whatever you want. Emperors could wage expensive wars, live in unimaginable luxury, and consolidate absolute power. And as long as the bread kept coming and the games kept running, the people stayed quiet. But eventually, cracks started to show. The Roman economy couldn't sustain this forever. The cost of importing grain, maintaining the infrastructure, and funding constant entertainment was astronomical. As the empire's borders began to shrink and trade routes became less secure, the grain supply became unreliable. When the bread stopped coming, suddenly people started caring about politics again. Riots broke out, emperors were overthrown. The distraction machine broke down, and when it did, people realized how little power they actually had. But by then it was too late. The political institutions that gave common people a voice had been eroded over centuries. The Roman people had traded their political power for comfort and entertainment, and once that trade was made, it was almost impossible to reverse. Now here's where this gets really uncomfortable. Look around at the world today. Really look at it. We live in an era of unprecedented entertainment. We have streaming services with endless content, social media that's literally designed to be addictive, video games, sports, reality TV, viral videos, the list goes on and on. We're more entertained than any generation in human history. And at the same time, we have cheap food everywhere. Fast food, processed meals, delivery apps that bring food to your door in minutes. Our basic needs are met, and we're constantly distracted. Sound familiar? Think about how governments operate today. When there's a major scandal or unpopular policy, what happens? Suddenly there's a huge news story about a celebrity, or a new viral trend dominates social media, or a massive sporting event captures everyone's attention. We're not saying it's all a conspiracy, but the pattern is there. Keep people comfortable, keep them distracted, and they won't organize. They won't protest. They won't demand real change. Just like in Rome, we've become politically passive while being convinced we're free. We can vote, sure, but how many of us actually understand the policies being implemented? How many of us are too tired after work, too absorbed in our phones, too distracted by entertainment to really engage with what's happening? The scary truth is that bread and circuses never went away. They just evolved. They became more sophisticated, more subtle, more effective. The Roman emperors would be amazed at how much better we've gotten at this. They had to import grain from across the Mediterranean and build massive stone amphitheaters. Today, distraction and comfort are delivered directly to our homes, to our phones, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've perfected the art of keeping people pacified, and just like in Rome, the people with real power, the ultra-wealthy, the political elite, they benefit enormously from this system. While we're binge-watching shows and scrolling through social media, wealth inequality grows, civil liberties erode, and major decisions that affect our lives are made without our meaningful input. So what do we do about it? That's the difficult question. The first step is awareness. Recognizing that these patterns exist, that this system is real, that's crucial. The second step is intentional engagement. Put down the phone sometimes, turn off the TV. Actually read about policies and candidates instead of just reacting to headlines. Talk to your neighbors. Get involved in local politics where your voice actually matters. The Roman people lost their power gradually, over generations, by choosing comfort over engagement every single time. We don't have to make the same choice. We can enjoy entertainment and good food while still being active, informed, engaged citizens. But it requires effort. It requires resisting the comfortable numbness that modern bread and circuses provide. The Romans learned this lesson the hard way. By the time they realized what they'd given up, the empire was already crumbling. We still have time. We still have the power to choose engagement over distraction, awareness over comfort. But that window won't stay open forever. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it sure does rhyme. And right now, we're hearing some very familiar verses. The question is, will we learn from Rome's mistakes, or are we doomed to repeat them? That's something only you can answer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.